The White Sox are staring down 100 losses for the third straight season, but that doesn't mean this team can't still accomplish some things over the final week of this season.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, a contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fan Side of the Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, the White Sox must go 5-1 this week to avoid losing 100 games for the third straight season. Going to be hard considering they have to play the Yankees in 3 of those games. So let's discuss what the team can still accomplish during the final week of the season. Then I want to discuss how the AL Central Division race should serve as a blended template for the White Sox to go about this rebuild. And finally, it's a Talk You Off Tuesday as I take on your mailbag questions and comments. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. All right, so I am going to find it nearly impossible for the White Sox to go 5-1 this week to avoid 100 losses. Folks, it's going to happen. They're going to have, for the first time in franchise history, 3 straight 100-loss seasons. Take that in because this franchise has been around for 125 years. It took 125 years to actually hit this big of a bottom. And this is a franchise that once threw a World Series. Now, the Yankees' magic number to clinch a playoff spot is 3, so yeah, you best believe they're going to want to wrap up a wild card spot against your last place Chicago White Sox. But that still doesn't mean these final 6 games are worthless. 3 against the Yankees, 3 against the Nationals. Because remember, development still matters this year. And I think there's a couple of things that can still be accomplished this week, despite this franchise being on the cusp of setting franchise futility, basically. I mean, during the celebration of 125th season, they're about to do something that has never happened in franchise history, and that is lose 100 games for 3 straight seasons. I know I've been sounding like a broken record, but take that into account of where we're at. But on the flip side, as I've said, there's at least some hope. You know, it feels like we might be able to get out of this dark abyss with the young core that has emerged. So that's why I still think these 6 games are important, and I think there is some things to be accomplished this week. And for example, one of them that I really hope happens this week, and I will be highly disappointed if it doesn't happen, is Colson Montgomery breaking out of his home run streak. I really hope that that happens this week. That should happen. You should expect that to happen this week. You know, I'm trying to be fair to Colson. I'm very excited about him. But I want to make sure that, hey, let's just get some more data before we go into next season with those 4 bars that I think he has to clear that I've talked about on previous episodes. Stay healthy, hit 25 to 30 home runs, adjust to, you know, pitchers making the adjustment to him, which we are now starting to see, and then eventually master playing third base because I think that's eventually where he's going to go, just because I think Billy Carlson is eventually going to force him off there, this year's first-round pick. But he should hit some home runs this week at Yankee Stadium. I mean, it is a left-handed slugger's dream. And the young man has last homered on 9-5. Remember, this is a guy that hit 18 home runs in 37 games. You know, a lot of people are ready to christen him as the face of the franchise, even me. And I still think he could potentially get there. But he has cooled off a little bit. He is now not homered in 18 days. So you would like to see him hit some home runs in a very home run friendly ballpark, especially to left-handers. And it would be nice to him hit maybe 2-3 more bombs. You know, 20 long ones, I actually like seeing that at least, you know, aesthetically, because it can show he can do more than just hit 18 home runs like he did at AAA last year. Because right now, if you look at his MLB numbers through the 65-game sample size, it's very identical to what he had at AAA last year. And there was panic last year that he was hitting 218. He's hitting 221. And I don't know if he's ever going to have the true hit profile. That's why you want to root for him to have a full power profile, be more of, again, that near 800 OPS guy, because he's got a decent on-base percentage, but he's slugging 550, 500 to 550, that type of stuff. And I would like him to end his rookie campaign strong. You would like to see Shane Smith finish his all-star rookie season strong with 2 more good starts. It would be nice to see his ERA and FIP finish under 4. Also, it'd be nice to show that his last start, where he got basically pummeled, was just one of those struggles that all pitchers have. Because all pitchers are going to get pummeled. Tariq Skubal, he gets hit. Max Fried has gotten hit. They're going to face him this weekend. You just want to see that just be an aberration, not the, oh no, he's going to wear out again like he did in July. Remember, then he sprained his ankle. And then he came back strong, pitched well in August, and I think the first 2 starts in September before his most recent start where he got roughed up. I would like to see Kyle Teal finish with an OPS over 800. He's at 799 right now. It would be great to see him also finish with a 2 F4, along with, say, Colson finishing with a 2 F4, and maybe Chase Mydroth putting that 2 F4 bar because he's at 1.9. And I would love to see Edgar Carroll get some more at-bats with runners in scoring position, because that's an area that, and I've been harping on every day, as you might recall, he needs to get better at, along with obviously hitting for power. Those are the 2 things that I think he needs to add to his skill set at the major league level in terms of showing that he can be a potential superstar, or at least a potential solid star player, in that 3 to 4 F4 range. And, I just think this is a good week to just get some more real world simulations for, like, say, Curtis Mead. This is a great opportunity for him to make at least one final lasting impression to the front office that he can maybe be part of this core. He gets a chance to make an argument to say, hey, if you don't go out and upgrade at first base, at least you got me as a mitigating factor, and I might end up still being better, because remember, Curtis Mead was a former top 100 prospect. He was once a very promising player. I wouldn't mind seeing Miguel Vargas at least try to finish with the best numbers possible. And when you look at the bullpen, Jordan Leisure, Grant Taylor, Winkelman Gonzalez, they all get another week to give a good lasting impression that they should join Mike Vassell in being the anchors of the bullpen next season. I still think they need to add a lot more arms. And if you're saying, why did you put Taylor in the conversation with the bullpen? I still want to hope that he's a starter if you're in that camp. Remember, his arm is going to dictate if he'll go back to being a starter or not. It all comes down to his arm. If he gets, arm fatigue again, I have a feeling they're going to then keep him in the bullpen. So let's just wait on that. But Andres Gomez and Sean Burke, they get one more shot this week to at least make a case that, yeah, we should be involved in next year's starting rotation competition. So there's plenty to accomplish this week, even though it's likely that this club is not, they're not going to avoid losing 100 games for a 3rd straight season. And hey, losing is a part of rebuilding. And it feels like the White Sox should learn from what the Guardians and the Tigers have done to get it to where they're going to be battling out for the AL Central Division title this week. And I want to discuss that after the break. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There's so many products out there, and it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. And I know I got my hair issues, and I'm definitely going to be giving Nutrafol a try. I mean, it's the reason why I wear a hat every day, especially when it's sunny outside. Sometimes I feel that bald spot. I'd be like, why is my head? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's sunburn, that type of stuff. And I can feel comfortable using Nutrafol because it is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. And for a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Going to make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, You can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify, so make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. And if it feels like I sound like I'm tired today, it's because I am. I was up at 3:30. I got my dog was having some seizures, and I had to take my dog in to the vet, and unfortunately had to put down my dog. And it's sad, but he was 12 years old and lived, in human years. So obviously lived a long life, and it just reminds you about, dogs. I'm a dog person. Dogs are great. They give you the unconditional love, but you only get them for so long. So if you got a dog and you're an everydayer or you're listening right now, make sure to give them a nice little, pet on the belly, on that type of stuff. Because those are things you're going to miss. That's what I'm going to miss right now. So again, if I just sound tired or if I get a little lethargic, it's just because I spent a lot of my morning at a vet ER. Well, let's get into back to some baseball business. The Guardians and Tigers, they're going to be battling it out for the AL Central Division this week after Cleveland. They've lost just 5 games this month. 5. They have won, I believe, 15 games this month. I mean, they're on this crazy hot stretch. I mean, they were 69-70 at one point at the beginning of the month. And remember, they swept the White Sox as part of their hot stretch to now give them a chance to basically take the AL Central Division away from the Tigers that I thought the Tigers had it all wrapped up. In essence, Cleveland is basically like the Tigers were last year. They just have come out of nowhere. And, it's going to be a fun series. I think I'm going to keep my eye on it just to see, because the other reason why, it feels like the White Sox are trying to replicate the pitching that the Guardians produce. They're trying to become the next pitching factory based on what you've seen, how they've acquired young pitching, how they brought in Brian Bannister first to be the director of pitching, how they actually brought in, all that pitching infrastructure first. And the fact that they, drafted Hagen Smith last year with the number 5 overall pick over, say, Connor Griffin, who's now the number 1 prospect in all of baseball per MLB Pipeline. It just shows you that they're trying to do, that they're trying to be this pitching factory. And that's actually a good thing, because like it or not, the current owner is not going to pay for pitchers. It's not going to happen. And I will say, though, on the flip side, the reason why I'm kind of interested too is this year's draft that the White Sox had, though, on the flip side, is an example of the White Sox taking a page out of the Tigers' book. Drafted a young prep player with a top 10 pick, with the hopes of being ready to contribute when the team is ready to contend. That's kind of like what they did with Riley Green in the 2019 draft. That same draft where the White Sox took Andrew Vaughn. By the way, Bleacher Report rated him as the White Sox worst player this year, for you Vaughn truthers. So it's like, I'm seeing how the White Sox are kind of mirroring 2 of their division foes on how those division foes eventually rose up the standings. And with Connor McKnight sharing on Sunday's special show that the team is looking for more well-rounded players, you basically look at both what the Guardians and the Tigers have done, and you see that's how they got a much improved roster. When the White Sox were ruling the AL Central in 2021, they, the Guardians and the Tigers were collecting their talent to basically overtake the White Sox. Now, the White Sox obviously contributed to their downfall, as has been well documented on the show. But you kind of see that the White Sox could mirror what their 2 division foes are. I'm basically suggesting the White Sox should blend the 2 paths that the Tigers and the Guardians have taken to get back to, being competitive and competing for the AL Central Division title. And I want to add, though, in 2 wrinkles that they should just do a little bit differently than what Cleveland has done by, focusing on pitching and defense and, adding Jose Ramirez in the international free agency like they did, a decade ago, and a little bit of a wrinkle of what the Tigers have done. Again, a more well-rounded hitting lineup, Tariq Skubal as your ace, that type of stuff. And that is, 1, make better trade deadline deals. So that means you got to have an attractive farm system for players that teams want. And 2 is, that means taking swings on high ceiling players. in the first 4 rounds of the draft and international free agency. Because when you look at the roster construction, in terms of like the WAR value, wins above replacement, and I do like wins above replacement because, again, it can just give you a, hey, here's an overall number of what this player can add in terms of this thing called winning. Basically, all the calculations, put it in and says, hey, this guy can help you win a certain amount of games based on what he can do overall. But I like the path that Cleveland has done in developing a rotation and a pitching staff that has helped them stay competitive. And it's also because it's cheap. Because remember, Jerry owns this team for 3 more seasons. And I'll get to cheapness and talent in the next segment. But if you can consistently put out a 15 F4 or better pitching staff, you got something going. And you're always going to need, in my opinion, and Connor McKnight talked about it on Sunday too, and I agree with him, you need about 5 starters in your rotation, plus 3 in reserve for injuries, whether that's, a swing man, or you've got 3 or 4 young prospects down in your farm system that you can call up and can give you a boost, that type of stuff, because injuries are going to happen. And then you probably need 13 bullpen arms, 8 for the majors and 5 in reserve. So you need about, let's see, by my math, 13, you need about 21 arms in your system. And just for depth purposes, by nature, if you're going to be using some of that young talent, it's going to be cheap. So that's one thing that, before you hear, he's talking about cheapness. I mean, in nature, it's probably going to be cheap because of the young talent. And while the Guardians have not gotten dominant starting pitching, they've gotten decent, and you tie that in with a good bullpen and Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan leading a solid offensive attack, you got something. But I would prefer a lineup that the Tigers have compared to Cleveland. Riley Green, Dylan Dingler, Zach McKinstry, and Spencer Torkelson. They all have F4s at 2.5. Plus, you got 4 raised floor players like Kerry Carpenter with F4s above 1. And then you have Tariq Skubal headlining your rotation. Probably the Cy Young. But I would make sure I have the pitching depth to eventually replace him. Obviously, if I can't sign him to an extension, and maybe more pitchers like Skubal, just because dominant pitching is fun. You'd like to have a full dominant pitching staff. That can't hurt. But the other reason why I like the Tigers lineup is even though they play at more pitcher-friendly ballpark, they're still hitting home runs. They got 9 hitters that have double-digit home runs this season, with Green hitting 34, Torkelson hitting 31. Imagine where the White Sox would be right now if they had 2 30-home run guys right now. Imagine where they would be. They would definitely not be, on a head-on collision with their 3rd straight 100-loss season. And the White Sox have got to be a power team with guys who can obviously get on base ahead of those power hitters, or even the power hitters. I've always believed this. If you got 2 strikes, then you got to fight like heck to get to first base. Try to get that walk. And there's nothing wrong with hitting bombs or taking walks or even a single or a double. Just get on base. Keep the line moving if you can't get the pitch to drive out of the ballpark. And that's why you blend the 2 paths. Basically, you should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time because you operate in Chicago, as you theoretically should have more money than the Tigers and the Guardians, in theory. And hopefully that is true in 2029. But I'd blend the 2 because, again, the pitching depth is a big thing that the Tigers are lacking right now. I mean, think about it. The Guardians traded Shane Bieber and lost Emmanuel Clase to suspension, and they're still contending. So if you blend the 2, you go for those more well-rounded hitters, you develop a boatload of pitching, it kind of decreases your chances of potentially falling apart. And that's one reason why the Tigers are falling apart, because, they didn't have actually the perfect roster because they didn't have enough pitching depth. And they didn't have enough good players that teams wanted. Their major move was acquiring Charlie Morton and Chris Paddock. And the Athletics' Cody Stavenhagen, if you have an Athletic subscription, I suggest you go and reach out for, read that article that he has. And you do want to play great defense and have great pitching like Cleveland, but you also want to have, those high ceiling guys. And I was talking to Justin Latta of Locked On Guardians before that. He was saying the one problem Cleveland has had, though, that hasn't really gotten them to the World Series is they targeted more well-rounded players than Steven Kwan, but it only produces one Steven Kwan. So you got to make sure that, you're shuffling out more players than just one Steven Kwan. That's why I like Caleb Bonemer, Billy Carlson, Jaden Foskey being drafted this year. Get more high floor players that teams want. Well, it's a Mailbag Tuesday, and I got a trade proposal and some feedback from you guys on rebuilding the trust of the team, and I want to discuss that after the break. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I'm always telling you, FanDuel's traditional money line spreads and over-unders, they are fun to play. But if you want to win big or at least double or triple your money, play FanDuel's props, parlays, and futures. So, for example, this Thursday, Seattle at Arizona game, FanDuel has a same-game parlay featuring Kenneth Walker III, Trey Benson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Marvin Harrison Jr. all scoring an anytime touchdown. That is currently at plus 3101 the last time I checked. So if it hits and you put, say, $10 on it, you can win $310.13. You think Chicago can beat Vegas on Sunday and both teams hit the over at 47.5 points? Well, that is at plus 270 the last time I checked. So you put $10 on that, and if it hits, you just won $27. So you pretty much nearly tripled your money. FanDuel is quick and easy and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, or if they get their podcasts, this show's available on all major podcast platforms. And then just kind of wrapping up the second segment, because you're probably like, whoa, Todd, you're way out ahead of your skis. I mean, we got to hope that this rebuild turns out. I mean, hope is one of the things we have, and we're seeing it. And I know, like, basically, I was alluding to, well, that means the White Sox will be sellers at some point. And yes, that's what you want the White Sox to be. And that will be a bar that Chris Getz is going to have to clear, because like it or not, he is the GM. And he's right now, I think he's done the easy work. It's easy to go to Jerry Reinsdorf and say, you now lost 121 games, thinking you could turn things around quickly. We can't do it that way. We've got to rebuild, and we've got to modernize the front office while we do it. So he's able to do that. And I like that they've built in the talent development infrastructure that they're building. I like that they have Ryan Fuller as the director of hitting and Brian Bannister as the director of pitching. I like that they've added Will Venable. They've added more adults to the room. I like him and Mike Shirley, the process that they followed. But where the jury's still going to be out on Chris Getz is, okay, can these players continue to thrive, or are they going to stagnate? Are you actually going to be able to develop this draft class that you just did and last year? Are they going to get to the big leagues and not just be like, hey, we got into the big leagues? Because that's what the last regime did. They got guys to the big leagues. They didn't do anything. They had to go to other places to thrive, like Gavin Sheets and Romy Gonzalez, that type of stuff. But if that gets to the next step, and the players are developing, the core is emerging, they're starting to win, at some point then he's going to have to be able to be a seller rather than he's going to have to be a buyer. Sorry, reverse that. Be a buyer. At some point, that means I'm alluding to that the White Sox will be a buyer. He's going to have to be good at being a buyer trader, basically. So these are things too to keep track of where things are going. And again, if I know I said like that means he's going to be a seller. Again, if I seen a little bit out of it, again, I've been up for a couple hours, had to take my dog into an emergency vet, and had to put my dog down. So little somber, but we're going to power through because I'm here for you. I love talking White Sox baseball, and it's, talking helps me get through this, that type of stuff. Well, today's mailbag, I got two takeaways I have before I even start off the mailbags. And one, I have no problem if you send me trade suggestions. I may think it might be unlikely, or I wouldn't do it, but I love to share them on the show as trade proposals. I think are always fun to either learn about prospects or just have fun thinking things up. So feel free to send them in. Two, when it comes to Jerry Reinsdorf and the organization trying to rebuild the trust, and I know I did the show yesterday. Maybe I didn't do a job, a good enough job to pose it, but I think they're two separate things, i.e. two things can be true. But I do have a suggestion on how maybe you want to tackle your criticism towards Jerry. So first, my guy Brian, who I'm enjoying having an electronic pen paling with him. Remember, if you want to have basically an electronic baseball pen pal, you can email me, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. I may not respond right away, but I love talking baseball. I love talking baseball with fellow White Sox fans. So I'll talk with you as long as it doesn't get awkward between us. And hey, I'm not saying you'd be the one awkward. Maybe I get a little weird. I'm not going to do that. Try to be a normal dude. And as long as it's respectful, I mean, disagreements are fine. Debate is fine. Attacks get us nowhere. Just a little hint for how we could also do the civil discourse these days. But here's what Brian had to say. Me and my cousin, while watching the Sox versus Pods game, are coming up with trades that the Sox could do. Plus, how about these two? 1, Lenyn Sosa and Andrew Benintendi to the Colorado Rockies for Chris Bryant. 2, Colson, Montgomery, and fillers for Corbin Carroll. All right, so no to Chris Bryant, and I messaged him. Don't worry about it. That's a hard no for me. And the biggest angle I'll take, and it's not just because, he's over the hill. It's just the players that you suggested, I'd actually rather keep because Sosa and Benintendi are at least guys that try to be available. I know Benintendi has had a couple of IL stints this year, but for the most part, Lenyn Sosa and Andrew Benintendi are usually available for like 115 to 130 games. Like I know Benintendi had an IL stint last year, but again, he came back. He wasn't gone. Bryant, and I actually liked Chris Bryant at a time when he was with the Cubs. And that's the one thing that sort of actually still bothers me to this day about the 2016 Cubs, because it was really hard to root against them outside of Aroldis Chapman and obviously Addison Russell, because their character was obviously not the greatest at all. But a lot of those guys were people that you can get behind. Like Chris Bryant with his shucks mentality. He was a guy that, hey, you could actually root for if you weren't a White Sox fan. But I really think his passion for the game is just gone after getting the big money, and he's never available. I mean, like never, ever. Like worse than Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada, and Luis Robert Jr. combined. He played 42 games in 2022, 80 in 2023, 37 in 2024, and he only played 11 games this year. I think he should actually probably retire. Now, for the Diamondbacks, I just don't think they're going to trade Carroll with him signed through, I think, like 2030 or 2031. I get they could get some salary relief, but I'm not sure that they're that desperate for salary relief. And then I wanted to share one of these YouTube comments that reacted to yesterday's show about the organization trying to regain the trust. This is from @MaxBruce2078. I don't care about promos or silly things like that. You want the fans to trust you? Spend some money. Get some players and put a better product on the field. I'm so tired of watching every game, every day, knowing that we'll probably lose, but trying to be positive and root for them anyway. Replace Michael Taylor, Benintendi, Mike Tauchman, though I generally like that guy, and Lenyn Sosa, and replace him with quality players. Get a power-hitting first baseman. Get some outfield help. Again, who can hit for power? Do you see where I'm going? Finally, spend some money on a couple bullpen arms that are actually good pitchers. Then I'll trust you, even if they still don't win a ton, because I know at least you tried. And I replied to him, and also shout out to Philip and Maverick, who left similar comments, but I'm pressed for time, so I was only able to get to this comment. And I responded back on the YouTube page, and basically what I said is, this is my suggestion, and this is my suggestion to us all to all of us fans. Instead of just demanding that Jerry spends so much money on free agents, why don't we demand to have it all? Like the Dodgers and the Padres have. Or at least the Padres had, because I don't know if they're ever going to spend that crazy money that they had before their owner sadly passed away. But I'm talking about organizations that draft well, sign international free agents well, develop them well, and then also sign impact free agents to help put them over the top. And one of the reasons why you want to draft well and sign international free agents, I talked about it in the second segment. I was talking again with Justin Latta of Locked On Guardians. We're talking about this. You build farm systems then for players that other teams want, so then when you need that player that puts you over the top, you can trade for them. And you need to have players that other teams can desire, because you can trade for impact players like Juan Soto when he's available before free agency and on the cheaper deals. And that's one suggestion to us all. You can acquire impact talent on the trade market. You just got to have a great farm system to do it. So why not? Why are we not demanding it all? Why are we always? This is my critique. And I fall into this trap too. So I'm not attacking anybody, but this is my critique. We're always like, Jerry's got to spend. Jerry's got to spend. He's got to open up his wallet. Well, sometimes spending doesn't work out so well. Look at the Mets in 2023 and this year. You do want young, controllable talent. Although I hate because it's cheap. I hate that too on the flip side. I want young talent because of the peak performance years. So if it means extending them through those years, then yes, that's where we should be spending the money. And don't get me wrong, I would love for Kyle Schwarber to be signed in the offseason to hit 30 to 40 home runs for the next 4 years. And it would be great for Jerry to crack open the wallet. But it's my suggestion that this team operates in the third biggest market. I don't care if the Cubs are in it. Demand it all. Demand like what the Dodgers get. Dodgers fans get. They get it all. Padres fans, they're getting it all. Why are we just settling for, let's spend some money on free agency when sometimes that doesn't work? All of it is supposed to work. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until a World Series champion's crown. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And again, I appreciate the mailbag questions. Keep sending them in. And I'm not trying to attack, both our mailbaggers today. I thought they were excellent questions and that type of stuff. So keep it coming. I'm just, again, suggesting we should be demanding to have it all. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Way Back Wednesday segment. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion on the episode page on YouTube. You can also email me, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, or leave them on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Also, leave a 5-star review at wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to hit the like button on the YouTube episode as well. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.